Let's talk more about that 7-week strike by workers at Sibanye-Stillwater. We're joined tonight by Labour lawyer Andrew Levy. Andrew, very good evening to you. Welcome to News at Prime as always. So you've got the unions who are saying they need 1,000 rand a month every year for 3 years in order to survive. You've got Sibanye-Stillwater that says if it pays them more than 850 rand, it would not be able to make a profit. Is there any prospect then for success as they prepare for talks again on Thursday?
The union is not going to get 1,000 rand. That much is clear. The one thing we know is that all strikes come to an end, sooner or later, and they will end in compromise. There seems to have been almost no movement from the union side, and the numbers are just against it. The events yesterday with the state president and the sort of rhetoric we're hearing today are standardized stuff. And what they indicate to me is that the solidarity of the strike and the will to strike is beginning to become a little bit shaky. And when that happens, the unions become quite desperate because if they can't resolve it and workers just trickle back to work, that's going to wipe them out and their credibility. So I'm seeing those signs. 3 months is a long time to go on strike. Now, this is not going to be new to Sibanye workers who, a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, we saw exactly the same thing from AMCU, who went on a 3-month strike and at the end of it showed little or no benefit whatsoever. The loss of wages grossly outweighed any increase they may have got. And I think this comes from the fact that we are constantly given and bombarded with generalizations which are not necessarily true. Now, to put some meat on this bone, if I may, for a moment, let's look at wages in South Africa. Are the Sibanye workers poorly paid? Can they not survive on what they earn? I don't think so for one moment. I'm not suggesting it's a good life. I'm not suggesting it's a wealthy life. But let's look at workers in South Africa. The minimum wage in South Africa is about 4,200, somewhere around there. And that's set at almost 50%, the median point of South African pay, which means that 50% of people should be benefiting from the national minimum wage and will be earning about 4,200 rand a month. The pay in the mining industry is high. It's a high pay industry. There are many reasons for that, including the danger and the various other issues that go with it, which one could explain as an economist, but aren't relevant to this discussion. But the fact of the matter is that the average pay in the industry is 14,000 to 15,000 rand a month. Remember, that's an average. Some are going to be more, some are going to be a little bit less. But nevertheless, this is 4 times the national minimum wage, which is what 50% of workers will get, let alone the people who are unemployed who get absolutely nothing.
Here's the issue, though, Andrew. Pardon me if I can come in there. Here's the issue with that. So it's a comparison, right, between these mine workers and people who are living on the national minimum wage or are unemployed. But it's also it's a hard sell to workers at Sibanye when they are reading that the CEO in just last year got about 300 million rand. Yes, the bulk of that was share incentives. But when they hear that the mine would not make a profit if it gave them each 1,000 rand more every month, but they're hearing about 300 million going in the direction of one person, regardless of however that figure is calculated, that's a hard sell, and it then hardens their position, especially when it comes right in the middle of their strike, does it not?
Yes, of course it's a hard sell. But, if it were possible to explain to the workers the two issues. The first is that a great deal of that money is not guaranteed money in the pocket. It's because of what the leadership in the company has done for the share price. It is risk. And if they were prepared to talk productivity bonuses, as we heard, then they could also benefit from this. This is the first thing. The second thing that obviously is it's a very emotional issue, but if you look at the numbers, and our last speaker talked about the numbers and actually said, look, we have 37,000 employees. If we pay them each this amount, we are wiped out. So, ultimately, if it becomes an issue of affordability, and the affordability is one of the most important factors in looking at wage increases. There are 5 of them. Affordability is one, and I've been talking about comparability. How do you stack up compared to other people? Comparability, they do very well. Affordability, the company is saying we can't afford it. Well, the simple suggestion is why not put it into arbitration? Go to wage arbitration, and let's see when the numbers are put on the table, because the company is going to argue that, what arbitrators will say about it. But at the end of the day, if we could see some movement from this figure, which I see as unattainable, and if you look at the company, certainly my knowledge is that they've moved from 800 to 850, so they've made a move. It's now, if you look at the conventions of collective bargaining, for the union to move. So let's see some willingness on their side, and we can get the show on the road again. But if the stalemate continues, then I would suggest, why don't the parties consider arbitration?
We've seen a pattern in recent years where, in fact, in the last decade or so, where workers are now holding their strikes much longer. This one is 7 weeks going into 8 weeks, right? Yes, you referenced an earlier AMCU strike where you say the returns after their strike didn't necessarily match the trouble. But there is something to be said about where workers are in terms of how long they're willing to ride it out. And I wonder if Labour and government are responding fast enough to that, because ultimately it will begin to bite even for the entities, no?
It does untold damage to the economy, to our credibility, which is a great pity because people regard us as the strike capital of the world. We're not by any manner of means, but it's just more bad publicity for us. Now, interestingly enough, obviously during the COVID shutdown and the period there, strikes dropped right down to a level that we haven't seen for years and years, 50,000 man days in 2020. Now, it's understandable. If people are not working, if the economy is shut down, you don't have strikes. There is no question that towards the end of 2021 and now, these strikes are increasing again very, very significantly. We're around about 500,000 man days already, and certainly there are 2 big strikes going on. Sibanye is one, which there's no end in sight, although when it comes, the end will come quickly. But the point that I want to make is that the additional man days come from a smaller number of strikes. So the number of strikes is going down, but the length of the strike is increasing. And so that is what we're seeing. The workers are holding out. Now, one of the sad things is, and we saw this during the Marikana strikes, where after 5 months the workers came back and accepted an increase which they could have had after the first 2 weeks of the strike. That is just an absolute tragedy. And we've got to find a way of letting the parties find themselves. Now, there was talk about our government doing enough. Frankly, I don't know that it is government's job. On the one hand, government obviously is interested in industrial peace. That's one of its objectives. It has a responsibility to everybody in this society. But nevertheless, our labor relations system is based on the notion of free collective bargaining. And that means that the parties need to find one another. Yes, certainly government can facilitate and try and persuade the parties to meet. But that's already happened.
Okay.
The CCMA has been involved. Well, there comes a point in every strike where both parties realize that the pain of going on is greater than the cost or the pain of settlement. And I would like to see, and if I were advising the unions, I would say to them quite openly, I say it now, you are not going to get 1,000 rand. You need to make some move in response to the employer's move, and let's break the logjam. Let's get moving again.
Andrew Levy, good to have your time. Thank you, sir.